The Insurance Brokers podcast is brought to you by Sarah Myerscough of Boston Tullis.
Welcome to the Insurance Brokers podcast with your host, Sarah Myerscough. This business podcast is for ambitious brokers determined to grow their business. Our guests are highly experienced industry experts and innovators. This is the place to leverage their success, learn how to break through barriers to growth, and discover a community of support and ideas whilst growing your business.
Good morning, Pat. Thank you so much for joining me on the Insurance Brokers podcast on this very sunny but cold Monday morning. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Sarah. Great to be here.
So I wonder if, we've got quite a good chat to have today. I'm really looking forward to it. But I wonder if you might kind of introduce yourself, your role, and how you come to be in your role, what your working life history is.
How long have you got? I'm Pat Brice. I'm Distribution Director at CFC Underwriting. How did I get here? Well, I've been at CFC for about 6.5 years, but prior to that I spent, 20 years working for RSA Group in loads and loads of different roles. So like pretty much everybody else I assume that you interview on this podcast, I kind of fell into insurance because I wanted a job and wasn't quite sure what I needed to do, but that's fine, and we need to get better at that. That's a separate conversation about how we attract really good people. But I did probably about 10 different jobs at RSA. I was an underwriter, did about 5 or 6 years in marine underwriting, doing cargo and freight logistics and stuff like that. I did a load of leadership roles in the marine business, ended up running the sales for our UK and European marine business. Then switched, which not many people do, I switched out of marine and into professional and financial lines, and I sort of got all the kind of weird looks from the marine guys who assume that you just kind of followed a single track. Once you're in marine, you're always in marine. Moved into professional lines and ran the regional business for RSA for a few years. Then did a sales job. We created a strategic relationships division for RSA and looked after our big broker relationships for a few years, and then switched back to running the whole professional and financial lines business for a couple of years too. So looking after PI and D&O and crime and personal accident and things like that. So lots of different leadership roles and lots of different kind of broker focused roles all over the UK, in Europe, and some international stuff as well. Left RSA at the end of 2014, I think it was. Had a few months off, wanted to do something completely different, and joined a business that was about 100 people. So I went from a business of about 7,000 people in the UK to CFC, which was about 110 people at the time I joined, something like that. Been there 6.5 years, and the business has grown from 100 and something people to 500 and something people in a fairly short space of time. So yeah, that brings me up to date.
Fabulous. So distribution director, what's your main kind of area of focus now?
So in really simple terms, what I do is look after our brokers. So we only distribute our products through regulated insurance brokers in 90-something countries across the world. We've got, at last count, just under 3,000 offices of brokers that send us business. So we've got a really broad and I think quite unique distribution base of multinational brokers, small retail brokers, wholesale brokers. My job is to make sure that we've got the right partnerships, make sure that CFC is facing into those brokers in the right way, and that we're getting the most value out of those relationships. So yeah, that's my job.
So one of the things that we've had some quite interesting conversations about previously is the role of technology in the distribution chain, and I know the sort of CFC mission has a bit of focus around that. Do you want to give us a bit of background on that?
Yeah, so I think it's fairly common knowledge now, but for those of you that don't know, but CFC was started 21, nearly 22 years ago, and originally the business was called clickforcover.com, so that's what CFC means. So started by Dave Walsh, who is still our group CEO. He had a vision that in the early years of the dot-com boom, that there was an opportunity to sell basic cyber insurance to the new online companies who were emerging and starting to do the first knockings of online trading. Click for Cover was the business that he set up. It was part of the Howden Group at the time. And the reality was, unfortunately, that not many people clicked for cover. So there was a great idea there, but the business and the industry wasn't quite ready for that. So the business had to diversify quite quickly into being a bit more of a
almost ahead of the curve there.
Slightly ahead of the curve, yeah, exactly. We've just been waiting for everybody else to catch up to some extent, and the world's doing that now. But we were selling commercial online insurance 22 years ago. Ever since then, technology's been really key to what we do. But there's a bit of a kind of a misunderstanding about how where the technology fits. And really, up until recently, the vast majority of the technology that we use has been in-house technology that allows us to trade much more efficiently and in a much more seamless way with brokers. So we haven't really gone down the conventional e-trade route, to use a slightly aged phrase now, but what we've done is use technology in-house to really streamline the inquiry process, the underwriting process, and free up our underwriting teams to process SME business incredibly efficiently. So vast majority of the business that we do is SME, average premium £1,500 to £2,000 or dollars, depending on where we're trading in the world. And the kind of business that we bring into CFC is the kind of business that would ordinarily stay very much in its local markets. It's SME business. It's got no right to come outside of the US or Canada or Australia or even the regional markets where we play in the UK. But because we can trade it incredibly efficiently, because we can make it really easy for brokers to send us very basic information and then process that using our own technology and get a quote out faster than all of our peers in the market can, we win more consistently. And one of the key points about SME business is that it's pretty much always the first response back that tends to win. So price is important, coverage is really important, the service that you can deliver around the edges of the proposition is key. But a lot of the time, if a broker in San Francisco or Sydney or Newcastle has £1,000 risk on their desk, they just want to get it placed, they just want to get it done. And what our technology does is allows us to make that super efficient, get the quote back, get the business bound, and move on to the next one.
How much kind of individual underwriting time is involved in that process, or is it predominantly done on algorithms and that kind of thing?
So the short answer is not a great deal of individual time. Our vision, and we'll apply this to the rest of our business over the next 3 or 4 years, is that the vast majority of the SME underwriting process is automated. Our underwriters' jobs are to basically make sure that the pricing feels right for that kind of risk, kind of tweak the dials accordingly, understand the broker, understand the sector that the clients work in, and then trade those risks on as they flow through the system, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that broker can get that risk placed. So the vast majority of that underwriting is done behind the scenes by rating models and, as you say, algorithms. And then the next stage of that evolution is that we're going to use a load of our new in-house technology to apply even more intelligence and even more external data and kind of, I suppose, machine learning, for want of a better phrase, to improve the underwriting experience and make that even more accurate and even more appropriate to the risk that's being placed, rather than just a straightforward slot rate for a professional indemnity risk.
So you're talking here about sort of plugging into data banks, publicly available data banks on whatever it might be, to pull that data and so you don't have to ask the questions, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So there's publicly available data. There's also data that we can build. So one of the beauties of being a 20-something-year-old business now is that we've got 20 years of data, but it's all our data. We've never bought any other insurance businesses. We've grown organically. So all of the data that we've accrued over those 20 years is all CFC's, and it's pretty clean. We acquired a business just over 2 years ago called Threat Informer, so a small insurtech business who were already doing some work for us, and we saw an opportunity to bring them in-house. What they were doing for us at the time was doing a whole load of external scans for publicly available and some kind of privately available data that would help us to analyse and understand cyber threats for our cyber clients and work out what that meant from a pricing perspective, how that would affect how we underwrote the risk, but also how we would manage that risk on an ongoing basis with the clients. Brought those in-house. They're doing a whole load of work for us on cyber, but we're also extending that across all of our volume lines over the next 2 or 3 years, so that we want to get to a point where the vast majority of our SME business can be automatically rated just on 1 or 2 pieces of information, and then there's a whole load of publicly available stuff, and there's a whole load of stuff that we can do using various other third-party partners, but also a load of information that we've gathered over the years to really inform the pricing and inform the underwriting process for that. Cyber is the live example of that. So a couple of years ago we launched single question quoting for cyber. So the only piece of information that we need to get a fully bindable cyber quote is the web URL for the company. So you can find out pretty much everything you need to know about a company if you've got the web URL. There's a load of obvious public data, but there's a load of data that's connected through lots of different data points across the internet. And then we've got, as I said, we've got our own sort of 20 years data that we can compare it against and use as a proxy to work out what's the rating, how exposed are they to certain risks, what was their cyber security like, have they been exposed to any kind of data breaches which they probably don't know about. So using that technology and making that really, really efficient, but removing the onus on the client to provide a whole load of information which is really difficult to get hold of and often not relevant to their own business, means that we can make that process really, really smooth and efficient, and they can focus on running their business and managing the exposures.
From a cyber perspective, not only is the information that you need possibly irrelevant to the person doing the day job, but it's jargon. I've been asked so many questions and I literally don't know what the words mean. So it's really difficult. On a completely side note, but I would highly recommend, I recently listened to a podcast, I think there's 10 or 11 episodes, and it's called The Lazarus Heist. And it's all about the Lazarus Group, which this podcast is talking about sort of being manufactured by the North Korean government, and it's how they hacked into Sony Records, and also how they tried to steal $1 billion from the Bank of Bangladesh. Have you listened to it?
Yeah, I haven't listened to all of it. I've listened to a couple of episodes, but yeah, as you'd expect, quite a few people at work have talked about this podcast. We've got a lot of cyber geeks at CFC in a good way.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I was absolutely hooked. Yeah, went home to my husband, who's a Cisco network engineer, and was like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? He's not allowing us to have Alexa because he thinks there's hackable opportunities there and things like that. It's insane, absolutely insane. Okay, so talking about cyber, not specifically, but in terms of emerging risks, COVID has seen an entire global change in how businesses are run, but also in sort of the thought processes going on in the minds of business owners. So there are lots and lots of emerging risks: financial, security, tech, blah blah blah. You'll know much more than me, and I know you guys play in a lot of those fields, and it's one of the areas that you're looking at. So just talk to me a little bit about that, about your vision on the next 5 years, that sort of how you guys are using tech to look at these areas.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned COVID there, and I think that was there's 100 things you could talk about over the last 18 months that have changed, but I think one of the big things from a technology and thinking about cyber perspective was that I don't think it really changed the risk landscape as such. What it did is it just brought right front of mind how reliant every single business is on technology, right? So the fact that some businesses pivoted really quickly to working remotely and working online, others took much longer to do that. But I think there was just this sudden realization that, wow, technology is absolutely key to what we do, and if we suddenly can't use that technology or something compromises that technology, we've got a problem. There was a lot of kind of speculation in the mainstream press as well as industry press about whether remote working was driving a cybercrime boom. I don't think that's true. I think it just kind of brought it slightly more front of mind, and made people think about it a little more, which is not a bad thing. As with any kind of insurance product, you need a few kind of world events to drive this kind of slight change in customer behaviour. But what it did do was it emboldened the criminals a little bit. I think because they just saw a bit more of an opportunity out there, and they were able to, I suppose, try and exploit that a little bit. It just emboldened them and made them go after targets that they wouldn't have ordinarily gone after, and maybe increased the demands slightly. So we have seen significant increases in particularly ransomware attacks over the last 18 months. But some of that is just that criminals have just, got a little bit more punchy and broadened their targets a little bit. I think broad of that, in terms of the technology space, we've always focused on emerging risks, which is a really broad subject and a really difficult thing to pin down. But I think the best way to articulate it is think about some of the sectors that we operate in. So put cyber to one side for a second, which is about 40% of what we do. But we operate in the healthcare space. So we do some conventional healthcare risks, medical malpractice for surgeons and allied healthcare and clinics and things like that. But what we're really interested in is digital healthcare. So another product of the pandemic has been the rise in the provision of digital healthcare services. So could be remote diagnostics, could be remote consultation. You even move into kind of, remote surgery and robotic surgery and things like that. Absolutely hundreds and hundreds of digital healthcare providers have grown up over the last 2 years in pretty much every major economy. And the risks that they face and the kind of insurance risks that they want to transfer are just not catered for by conventional insurance products. So, if you're running a digital healthcare business, you've got some professional liability exposure, you've got medical malpractice exposure, you've probably got tech E&O exposure for the product that you've built and designed, you've got a cyber exposure, you've got the bodily injury piece, you've got all sorts of products. And there really wasn't any product that kind of fitted all of those things. So they might buy a separate PI policy and a separate cyber policy, but if you have a loss, trying to get those 4 or 5 policies to talk to each other is a nightmare. So what we've done is built a blended product that caters for those e-health or digital healthcare companies. So that's one example of a fairly conventional sector, but with emerging risks and the use of technology that sits around it, and that's where we'll focus our attention. Same goes for media risks. So again, there's a fairly conventional suite of products available for media companies, TV production companies and graphic designers and people like that. But we're really interested in people that have moved into digital brand licensing or esports or Instagram influencers and TikTokers and all that kind of stuff. The emerging risk, because the platform is one part of it, but then there's a technology exposure there, but also the kind of liability risks that they're exposing themselves to are incredibly different and require a slightly different underwriting approach. So there's there's the conventional stuff which we can do, and we love conventional professional liability risks, for example, but the emerging stuff where there are definite gaps and you need a slightly different underwriting approach is what really gets us interested.
Do you know, I am astounded by e-healthcare. Like that's a concept that had not occurred to me until this particular conversation in terms of the physical healthcare. I did a podcast for my other business a few months ago now with a mental health professional, and he was talking about the rise of AI-led counselling and sort of this issue between wanting people to own their own mental health and therefore have a conversation and go away and put some practical things in and to try and self-help with the support of, versus AI-led somebody to be there every time you want to moan. That's putting it quite bluntly, but do you know what I mean? There's this idea that I have to go to the robot to help me because I can't possibly get through this, it's available on tap. And that is an interesting risk when we were having this conversation that I hadn't really thought of, how on-tap counselling could end up actually making an issue worse, because there's no end solution. It's just, I haven't articulated that well, but you understand what I mean?
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
It absolutely astounds me. I read a book a while ago by Mo Gaudat, who was the chief business officer for Google. And he's written a book called Solve for Happy, and I've mentioned it in loads of podcasts. But he's also got a podcast, and I've listened to a few of those. And one of the things he does is he says that algorithms are around us all the time, and they're learning, but they're in their infancy at the moment. So what they're learning is not just logical patterns, but also emotional patterns and emotional behaviours. And what he said is, he worries that what we're giving is a lot of anger at the moment, and they're picking all of this stuff up through computers, through social media, through passive aggressive, through Twitter, bullying and all of that kind of stuff. But when by 2050, when the algorithms are in their adulthood, it will be, in terms of intelligence, what Einstein is to a fly, what they are to us. And the question then becomes, why keep the fly? And I was like, oh my God. When you start talking along what is possible through algorithms, through digital space and business space, it's astounding. It's so interesting. So interesting. You picked up something else there about the media landscape and TikTok and Instagram influences. So again, in my other business, I'm looking at a lot of that stuff because it's all around mental health. And I was having a marketing meeting with a few people about, because the app isn't live yet, so we're having a conversation about it. We're talking about whether we should use TikTok, whether it's relevant, and how do you become sort of an influencer on TikTok when you're a middle-aged mum of 3. And my daughter came in, my 9-year-old, and she held a piece of paper up in front of me, and it had about 3 different influencers from TikTok and YouTube, and basically a list. Get 10,000 followers, then do this, then do this. And I said to her, right, you're hired. But the youth understand this in a way that I will never understand it, and they buy into it in a way that I will never understand it. So it's so interesting that you guys are sitting on that forefront, talking and looking and at the emerging risks, the trends, the way the world is going. I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah, the risks are different, and it comes back to one of the fundamental kind of drivers of the CFC business is that we always try to design and distribute products that clients want to buy and meet their need. Whereas I really do think, and I've too many years in the insurance industry. The insurance industry builds products that the insurance industry thinks are good. They don't build products that clients want to buy until you get to the really bespoke, large kind of complex, sophisticated buyer stuff. SME insurance is designed by insurers without really thinking about what the client wants, or at least it generally is. I think that's across the board. So if you're an SME buyer, particularly an SME company that's moving in that either the digital space or in the social media space, it's just really difficult to find insurance that you really think meets your needs. It just doesn't fit the kind of exposures that you've got and doesn't allow you to build the business in the way that you want to build the business. So I think it's what we started 20-something years ago, which is just trying to build products that are relevant for emerging economies, but you have to think like them too, so the people that we have running the individual teams really immerse themselves in this stuff. They talk to people across the industry outside of insurance and really try and understand the products, because this stuff moves really quickly, and a product that you launch now will be irrelevant in 12 months' time at the kind of pace of technological change that we've got. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that keeps us moving.
One of the terms that I've coined, I'm claiming it, across these podcasts, it keeps coming up, is this idea of nimbility. And particularly in the tech space, that is so important to be able, like you say, to keep ahead of the curve. And a couple of things that I've noticed through the podcast and some of the work we do, or conversations that I've had, are around this putting the buyer at the centre. But that's almost a cliche now. What you really mean by that, and what you're talking about, is that immersion in that sector. And there's a few books that I've read, people that I've interviewed that talk about insurance businesses that have sprung up from somebody outside the insurance industry that's then pulled the insurance expertise in to fix what they see as either as a distribution problem or as a blended product unavailability, etc. And Amazon have got it really right, and I know we've had this conversation before, but Amazon's now focusing on the SME market, taking it out of personal into Amazon Business. And that idea that you can take what is essentially 99% of the global economy run by SMEs and categorize it in a way that is needs first is really astounding. So what's next for CFC? Like, what's your 5-year plan? You've obviously times 5 the head count. World domination?
No, that sounds really difficult and quite challenging. No, so yeah, 5-year plan. It's interesting. We've just we've just finished our new 5-year plan, I suppose, as part of our kind of reinvestment process that we've done. But in really simple terms, it's more of the same. So one of the things we talk about, one of our kind of mission statements is that we want to be the most highly regarded specialist insurance provider. So size isn't actually critical. We want to grow, and we think we've got a really nice business model that allows us to keep growing. So give or take, for the last 5 or 6 years, we've grown at about 30 to 35% organically every year. I mentioned about the fact that we've got these 3,000 broker offices, so they all send us business every week, right? And what that generates is just this really cool flywheel effect, because it just keeps turning. They keep sending us business, and all we have to do every year is just get them to send us a little bit more and bind a little bit more, and the organic growth to some extent looks after itself. But the size really isn't important. We've got no plans to open loads of offices everywhere. We're still fundamentally a one-office business. We've got 90-something% of our people are based out of our London office. One of the areas that we really do want to expand on. So we have a cyber incident response business called CFC Response. They are two of those offices are one of two of the very few acquisitions that we've made over the last few years. So we bought an incident response business in Texas, who were already doing some work for us, and then at the start of this year we bought an incident response business down in just outside Brisbane in Australia, and then we've got a big CFC response business in London. And what that does is it gives us this global capability. So cyber incident response is basically emergency response stuff, right? It's instant. If a cyber attack happens, you need expertise available in that moment, and you need it in your time zone so that people are available to give you that kind of expert assistance and deploy the right kind of capability to you. What you don't need is a hotline that goes through to a third-party provider who, it's the middle of the night, so that somebody's reaching across the bedside table and picking up a mobile phone. You need that kind of really joined up capability. So we really want to grow that over the next few years. We expect that to really expand. And one of the things that's interesting, you mentioned earlier about clients and understanding exactly how they operate. Something we want to build out is these kind of sort of trusted channels where we can work really closely directly with our clients. So we are, said at the start, 100% broker distribution. That will never change. We only want to sell through insurance brokers. I think the value that brokers add is absolutely immense. And having seen a few failed attempts for people to try and do specialty insurance direct to consumers, it just, in my opinion, it doesn't work. So the broker value is really, really key. But if we can work out ways of engaging with our clients and helping them to manage their risk better with the permission of the broker, with the trust that we've built up, I think that's really, really valuable. So we do that currently through our CFC Response app. We've got a mobile app which we encourage all of our cyber customers to download and register on. At a basic level, that is their reporting tool. So if they have a cyber incident, they have a mobile app, and they can report a claim and get it looked at instantaneously by our cyber experts. Where we think it's incredibly valuable, and this is what we're going to do a load of work on moving forward, is it's also a tool for us to help them manage their risk. We've got a big threat analytics team internally whose job it is to constantly just scan the cyber landscape and identify threats and potential weaknesses for our client base. And because we already know an awful lot about the way that our clients work from a technology perspective, because we know what cloud provider they're using, or what technology system they're using, or what email server they're using, that app can be a really useful tool to immediately say, right, there's a vulnerability here. don't know if you remember earlier this year, there was a huge issue with the Microsoft Exchange servers, and there were some vulnerabilities identified. We were able to get really, really quick notifications out to all of our clients who with that vulnerability and say, right, this is happening, here's what you need to do, here's the patch you need to apply, and here's how to get in touch with us if you've got any questions about this, about how this happens. And we think we prevented dozens, if not hundreds, of cyber incidents as a result of that, because we were able to get ahead of it. But that's a bit of a step change in the traditional specialty insurance world, which is 100% intermediated. Quite often, two brokers in the chain in specialty. You know, there's a retailer and a wholesaler. We think that ability to get direct to the client with that really critical information and keep scanning the client's information on a real-time basis adds some real value. So we'd expect to see that expand across multiple product lines and just find different ways to build that kind of trusted contact point with the client as we move forward. So that's one example of where we think technology can really add value. We just need to we just need to prove that now, and there's a whole load of that stuff already in train.
Fabulous. That sounds really interesting. So I quite like the app idea. Are you looking at building out apps that are relevant to each different product line, I suppose?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, the CFC Response app is the first one, and potentially the most relevant from a customer perspective. But yeah, we want, in really broad terms, we want to use technology in any way that we think adds value from a client perspective and from a broker perspective. So if we can find different ways of interacting with our clients and our brokers, then we will do. But the critical part is just trying to make it as organic and as efficient as we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. Pat, it sounds like what you guys are doing at CFC's ahead of the curve, on the curve. Curve has caught up with you, but you're riding it well. It sounds fabulous. It's been really, really interesting speaking to you this morning. And I really thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you have enjoyed what you have heard, have any questions or feedback, please leave us a review and we will be sure to get back to you. If you would like further information on how Boston Tullis Group can support your business, or if you would like to join us on an episode, please do not hesitate to contact us.